Hey guys, another video for our How to Do Stuff in Japan playlist. So, I was exchanging some emails this week with one of our PayPal supporters who is considering moving to Japan, and he had lots of questions and I answered a few of them, but it's very hard. It's such a huge topic, it's very hard to put into a few emails what needs to be said. So I thought maybe this video will help him, but maybe there's someone else out there it might help as well. So just a few observations about this particular topic. So the first one would be that the experience a lot of people have of Japan is either through just what they've seen and heard about it, and I have actually had people say to me before that they're thinking of moving to Japan, and I've said, how much time have you spent here? And they've said none. They haven't been here yet, so they're considering moving to Japan but hadn't visited yet. But more commonly than that, perhaps, is people who have visited Japan and their experience here convinced them that they want to live here. So my observations would be this: when I first came to Japan, it was for a holiday, and I would observe that the experience of visiting Japan for a holiday is way different from the experience of Japan living here for a number of reasons. So obviously, if you come to Japan on holidays as a guest, your experience of being here and the way you'll be treated and the way you'll be seen will be way different than if you're living here. So obviously, you guys would know in your own countries, your life is way different when you're working in a normal working week than it is when you're on holidays, right? Because when you're on holidays, you live like a king, don't you? You don't have to go to work, you do whatever you want to do. And obviously for people visiting Japan for a holiday, that's what it's like, isn't it? They're coming here, they don't have to go to work, they've brought money with them to spend, so they spend time in restaurants, and you basically live like a king when you come here for a visit, don't you? You've got no obligations, so it's all very cool and groovy. You know, probably stay in hotels, you don't have to do any chores. It's fabulous, isn't it? It'd be nice if life was like that all the time, but for most people, that's just what it can be like when you're on holiday. So obviously you've got that aspect where it's all very carefree and fabulous. The other thing is how you're perceived by Japanese people. And when you're here as a guest and you're perceived as a guest, the expectations on you are very low because you're a guest. So they understand that you're a guest, you're here for a short time, that they don't expect you to speak Japanese, they don't expect you to understand Japanese customs. Usually, some people unreasonably will expect visitors to understand Japanese culture and behaviour how they're supposed to, but usually people give you a fair bit of leeway because they understand you're a guest, you're a visitor. You don't know how you're supposed to behave, and you don't need to speak, or you're not expected to speak Japanese and not expected to read Japanese, and they'll help you because you're a guest, you're here for a short time. You know, what do you think of Japan, they'll say, and they'll generally be very, very kind and very supportive. So that, combined with the fact that all the other stuff I mentioned previously about living like a king, obviously makes it a fabulous experience, right? And it, like Nirvana, right? My Nirvana time in Japan. For most people, I have actually seen people, including a family member, who came to Japan and spent a couple of weeks here, and we had a good time, but at the end of it she said there's no way she could live here because she recognised pretty quickly that because I kept telling her, you can't do that here, you got to do this, you can't do this, you got to do that, and it was way too conformist for her. She couldn't handle it. So she knows she couldn't live here. But for a lot of people that come here for a holiday, they go away with the feeling that, oh wow, I'd love to live there. I wish life was like that all the time. But of course it isn't, is it? Because if you come here for a week or two or a month or whatever for a holiday, your life, if you lived here, wouldn't be nothing like that, of course, right? For most people, unless you're independently wealthy, if you come here to work, if you come here to live, most of us have to work, and so you'd have to be going to work, which means, you probably have to end up working for a Japanese company or with a Japanese boss, which is a fabulous experience in itself, he said sarcastically. But you'd have all those obligations, and you'd have to behave like a Japanese person. You know, that's what's expected of you. If you live here, you've got to behave like a Japanese person. So when you go to work, you got to do what the Japanese people do at work, and you know, all those other work responsibilities, and pay your bills and everything else. And then as far as living, you know, you have to obviously find somewhere to live, and then conform to all the things you've got to do in the way that you live. And then the expectations on you change when you live here. And the longer you live here, the more the expectations change. And I've seen it lots of times over the years. People say, how long have you been here? And when I'd only been here for a very short period of time, the expectations are much lower. So how long have you been here? Oh, 6 months. Oh, that's wonderful. You know, what do you think of Japan? You know, and whereas when you've been here for a couple of decades, their expectations change. You can sort of see them looking at you like, really? You've been here for a couple of decades and your Japanese is still that bad? So it's true. It's true. If you're living here and you're working here, they expect you to speak Japanese, they expect you to read and write Japanese, they expect you to do what everybody else does. Because you're not a guest. If you come here to live, you're not a guest, you're a resident. And you have to do, irrelevant to what your visa status is, if you're renting an apartment and you're living here and you're going to work, and you're a resident and you have to behave like everybody else. So the expectations on you change. So I would observe that life here as a visitor, as a guest, is way different from life here as a resident, someone who's living here. There's lots of statistics I've seen over the years on this. There was one, people who come here on a 1-year visa. There was a huge percentage, it was more than half, it was like 60% or 70%, maybe 60%, something like that, of people that come here on a 1-year visa go home within 6 months, right? So they come here and they get start their job at the English school or wherever they are with their Japanese boss, and they last about 6 months and they go home. And it was a high number, it was like 60%, something like that. Because the reality of living here, obviously a lot of the things that are good about Japan remain good no matter how long you're here. You know, there's a lot of stuff about Japan that I appreciated when I first came here as a visitor, that I still appreciate now. You know, the cleanliness and the low crime rates and the wonderful food and the politeness and the quietness of the people, and you know, all those things, they remain constant. But there's also a lot of other things about the place that we've made videos about over the years that are really hard. So many times when I've made videos over the years talking about the difficult things, or social things, or just different things that are difficult for non-Japanese people to live with, many times over the years, people have left a comment and said, I always thought I'd like to live in Japan, but after hearing this, I don't think I could. And some of you guys watching this right now would be in that boat, no doubt, because I've been told that so many times over the years that after hearing that video about how people don't say what they really think, or you know, whatever it is about Japanese society that people find out through the video they couldn't live with, and then they'll say, oh, I couldn't live with that. I couldn't live with that. You know, a lot of the relationship videos we made about relationships and things like that, and people recognise, I just couldn't live with that, which is one of the reasons we make those videos, because it's much better. That's why we go on about the anything and everything about Japan. You want to know the whole story. If you just spend your time watching videos about how wonderful Japan is, and then you come here and live here, you might be really disappointed, because you'll find out the reality isn't you know, it's not all fabulous. You know, there's some things about living here that are really difficult. So again, statistics, I can't remember any. I don't Wikipedia stuff before I make videos, guys. I just give you observations of what I've seen and heard. And I remember seeing another one once about the percentage of foreigners who actually come here to live and stay here is really low. You know, and just in my own experience, you know, when I first came here, there was an Australian guy that had been here for like 15 years or something. And, you know, a few years ago, he went back to Australia. My English buddy here is a wonderful guy, often talks about going back and living in England. And he loves it here. He loves it here, but there's so many things about this culture that are very hard for a foreigner to live with forever. You know, he one thing that bothers, I'm sure he wouldn't mind me telling you, there's one thing that he's not comfortable with is that the relationships here. I made a video about this years ago. Some people didn't like it and said that it's I actually said something about like it's impossible to have a real friendship, depending on what your idea of a friendship is. to have a real friendship with a Japanese person. And some people didn't like that. I've got Japanese friends, I don't know what you're talking about. It depends on what your idea of a friend is. And for my English buddy, his idea of a friend, you just can't find in Japan, because it's just different culture. You know, I've got another friend, another Australian buddy, who said that it's because you don't have that shared experience, you know, or that similar experience of life from when you're young, that it makes it harder to relate. That's his theory on it. But whatever the reason is, that people that live here do tend to feel a bit isolated, because it doesn't matter how long you live here, you're just not part of the group, really. And you can leave you feeling really isolated, which is why a lot of foreigners go home. There's lots of reasons. There are a lot of reasons why foreigners that come here to live go home. That's one of them, feeling isolated from people, and just all the expectations to behave like everybody else. And there's lots and lots of reasons. Those of you who haven't seen the How to Do Stuff in Japan playlist, you know, have a look at that, because you'll find the reasons on there why people don't last here, why eventually they go home. And you'll also see the comments underneath by people saying, I couldn't live with that, I couldn't live with that. Now, I'm not trying to be negative, I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. All I'm trying to do is point out what I've seen. This is what I've seen. This is what I've seen. The chances that your relationship with a Japanese person is gonna last forever is really remote as well. The statistics on that are really bad as well. So that's another one. People coming into a relationship, it falls apart, they go home. A really sad one recently, an Aussie guy who's actually married to a Japanese lady, had a couple of kids, and she basically shut him out, and he tried and eventually gave up and went back to Australia, which is really sad, because he's had to go up, he went back and left his kids here. So it's really hard, it really is hard. So I guess my advice or suggestions would be, if you're dead set on wanting to live in Japan, my first thought would be, don't close any doors in your own country. So for example, everything I owned in Australia, I had it all in storage, and I left it in storage for years. I was living here for years. It was after I got married, and after I had my first kid, before I actually decided to get rid of all the stuff that I had stored away in Australia. Because, and I'd suggest that be an example, you know, don't be selling up everything you own where you're living now and moving to Japan and closing the door behind you, because you might want to go back. You know, you might want to go back 6 months later, or a year later, or 5 years later. So, you know, that'd be one suggestion I'd make. Don't close the door behind you. And perhaps if you can, you know, maybe just come for a year on a 1-year visa, working visa, and come here and rent an apartment and work for a year and see how you go. I don't usually like talking about my stuff too much, but I didn't come here with the intention of staying here. I actually promised my mother, I promised my immediate family, my mother and my immediate family, that I'd be back when I came here originally. It was supposed to be just for a short period of time, and I said I'll be back. And I was saying, oh, you're going to meet a Japanese lady and get married and stay there. No, I won't do that, I'll be back. So I came here with the intention of not staying here and coming back. But I know a lot of people come here with the intention of staying here. And for them, I think it's better to come here. It's probably better to come here with the intention of not staying for a long time. That's probably better. Come here with the intention of staying for a year and seeing how it goes. You know, leave all your stuff in your home country. Don't close any doors there. Come here, give it a shot for a year. You know, work for a Japanese boss, which I alluded to that before. It's notorious working for Japanese bosses. You can be lucky, but usually it's horrible because of the usual relationship Japanese bosses have with their staff. So, you know, come here, work here for a year for a Japanese boss, rent an apartment, you know, conform to all your recycling and garbage expectations and behaviours, and try and fit in as best you can. Pay your bills and do all the things that living here requires, and see how it goes. You know, see how you go for a year and see see if you still want to be here, or you don't want to be. You know, it's probably a better way to do it to avoid disappointment, because for some people, and I've seen this before, you know, they sell everything in their home country and do the big goodbye, and then they come here and it doesn't work. You know, they find out the reality isn't what they thought it was, which for all of us is probably true. You know, your perception of what this place is like when you come here for a visit, or come here for a short time, your perception of what this place is, what this place is about, you realise later it's different from what you thought it was. You know, it's really, really different from what it seems at first. Not to mean it's bad. Now, you know, from my own point of view, I love it here, and my intention is to never leave. You know, I'm quite happy to live here forever. You know, it happens to suit me, but it really depends on what you're prepared to accept. So what's important to you and what's not important to you, what you can live with, what you can't live with, and how that fits the reality, you know. And I think it's just a matter of just what fits people, you know, what suits people. And I think for me, it's worked, and I'm happy to stay here. It's hard sometimes, but I'm happy to stay here. But I've seen over the years, you know, different people that I've met here, foreign people from different countries who I've met here, who enjoyed it here for a period of time and then went, no, I'm going back to my own country. You know, for a whole heap of reasons that you'll see on that How to Do Stuff in Japan playlist. There's a lot of stuff on there that just some people just can't live with. The relationship one is a big one. The relationship one is a really big one. It's the relationships that you have with people. You know, my English buddy is a really sweet, personable sort of guy who likes to have deep connections with people. So this place isn't going to do it for him, right? Because that's not the sort of relationship they have here. You know, they don't have deep, you know, close, deep, honest, open relationships here. Usually, they just don't. They just don't, you know. So for him, it sort of feels a bit empty living here, because, you know, back in the UK, he had all these people he felt really close to, you know, and here you just don't get that. You just don't get that here. So yeah, that'd be my advice, guys, and to the buddy on PayPal who set this video in motion. This is what I was trying to say to you in those emails, you know. Don't close the door where you live. Sort of keep everything there where you can come back to it if you need to, and maybe just come for a year, see how it goes. If you like it, stay for another year. You know, I think making big announcements to everyone in our lives that I'm moving to Japan, I think that puts a bit of pressure on, you know. Whereas if you just do, you know, say I'm going to Japan to work for a year, see how it goes. Come here for a year. If you're 6 months into it and you decide you want to go home, you can. If you make it to the end of the 12 months, you might renew your visa or stay for another year. See how you go. There's no real need, you know, we don't need to commit ourselves to live anywhere permanently, you know. It's quite normal to have a bit of flexibility with that sort of stuff. So that'd be my advice to our friend and to anybody else who's thinking about moving to Japan. I wouldn't even use that word, guys. I wouldn't even talk about moving to Japan. I'd talk about I'm going to go stay in Japan for a while. Going to go and work in Japan for a year, see how that goes, and see what it's like. And if you like it, stay for another year, and so on. Anyway, I hope that helps our PayPal buddy, and I hope it helps someone else as well. This probably deserves, I remember I actually made a video about this years ago, probably said similar things, because the observations are still current, so possibly we'll be talking about this again in the future. So hopefully that was of help to someone. More videos coming soon.